The rain drummed against the windows of the old warehouse as Detective Lisa Rodriguez adjusted her worn leather jacket. 8 months. That's how long she had been living a lie, breathing it, sleeping it, and becoming someone else entirely. The FBI had given her a new identity, Maria Santos, a small-time bookkeeper with a shady past and an even shadier present. Tonight felt different, though. There was something in the air, a tension that made her skin crawl. The meeting she was about to attend could be the breakthrough her team had been waiting for. For almost 2 years, the FBI had been trying to crack the money laundering operation that seemed to have its fingers in every dirty business deal in downtown Chicago. Lisa checked her watch. 7:45. The meeting was set for 8, and being late wasn't an option when you were dealing with people who solved problems with bullets instead of words. She looked at herself in the cracked mirror hanging on the warehouse wall. The woman staring back at her was tired, rough around the edges, with dark circles under her eyes that told the story of too many sleepless nights. This wasn't the polished FBI agent who had graduated top of her class from Quantico 5 years ago. This was Maria Santos, a woman who had learned to count dirty money faster than most people could count clean bills. A woman who had earned the trust of some very dangerous people by proving she could keep her mouth shut and her eyes open. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. It had taken weeks of preparation, months of careful character building, and countless hours of studying the criminal underworld she was about to enter. Every detail mattered, from the way she held her cigarette to the slight accent she had developed to match her cover story. Lisa's handler, Agent Michael Torres, had been monitoring her progress from a safe distance. Their communication system was simple but effective, coded text messages that looked like everyday conversations between old friends. Tonight, though, something was wrong with the signals. The industrial area where she was operating had always been tricky for radio communication, but lately it had been getting worse. The warehouse where tonight's meeting was scheduled belonged to the Torino crime family, at least on paper. In reality, it was owned by a shell company that was owned by another shell company, which was owned by yet another company with an address that led to an empty lot. The FBI had been trying to untangle this web of fake businesses for months, and every lead seemed to disappear into thin air. As Lisa walked through the dimly lit warehouse, her footsteps echoed off the concrete walls. The smell of rust and old machinery filled the air, mixed with something else, the unmistakable scent of fear and desperation that seemed to cling to places where illegal deals were made. She had learned to trust her instincts over the past 8 months, and right now those instincts were telling her to be extra careful. The people she was about to meet weren't the kind who forgave mistakes or gave second chances. They were businessmen in the deadliest sense of the word, treating human lives like numbers on a balance sheet. The meeting room was in the back of the warehouse, behind a heavy metal door that looked like it hadn't been opened in years. But Lisa knew better. This door was used regularly, and the room beyond it had seen more cash change hands than most banks processed in a month. Tony Torino's nephew, Vincent, was already there when she arrived. He was a young man trying hard to look older and more dangerous than his 25 years suggested. His expensive suit looked out of place in the grimy warehouse, but the gun bulge under his jacket was all business. "Maria, you're on time," Vincent said, his voice carrying the slight rasp of someone who had been smoking since childhood. "Uncle Tony appreciates punctuality." Lisa nodded, staying in character. "Business is business, Vincent. Time is money, and I don't like wasting either." 3 other men were seated around a folding table that had seen better days. Lisa recognized 2 of them from her months of surveillance, Joey Castellano and Rick Morrison, both known associates of the Torino family with records longer than most novels. The third man was new, older, with gray hair and the kind of calm demeanor that came from years of making difficult decisions. "This is Mr. Gray," Vincent said, not bothering with real introductions. In this business, names were kept to a minimum, and trust was earned through actions, not words. Mr. Gray studied Lisa with sharp eyes that missed nothing. I've heard good things about your work, Maria. Tony tells me you've been very helpful with our accounting needs. Lisa had spent months building this reputation. She had proven herself by handling smaller jobs first, cleaning money from illegal gambling operations and drug sales. Each successful transaction had earned her more trust and access to bigger operations. I do what I'm paid to do, Lisa replied, keeping her voice steady, and I do it well. The meeting that followed was exactly what the FBI had been hoping for. Large amounts of cash were discussed, transfer methods were explained, and most importantly, names were mentioned. Lisa made mental notes of everything, knowing that her photographic memory would be crucial in court later, but as the meeting progressed, she noticed something troubling. The amounts being discussed were much larger than anything she had handled before. The operation was bigger than the FBI had suspected, reaching into legitimate businesses and involving people in positions of real power. By the time the meeting ended, Lisa's head was spinning with information. She had witnessed the planning of what appeared to be the largest money laundering operation in the city's history. The marked bills that Mr. Gray had given her as a down payment felt heavier than their actual weight suggested. Walking back to her car, Lisa felt the familiar mix of excitement and exhaustion that came after a successful undercover operation. But tonight, there was something else, a nagging feeling that she was being watched. She had learned to trust these feelings, and they had kept her alive more than once. The parking lot was poorly lit, with shadows that seemed to move and shift with every passing cloud. Lisa's car, a beat-up Honda Civic that matched her cover identity perfectly, sat alone under a broken streetlight. She had chosen this car carefully. It was reliable enough to get her out of trouble, but unremarkable enough to blend into any neighborhood dot as she got into the car. Lisa noticed that her hands were shaking slightly. The adrenaline from the meeting was wearing off, leaving behind the cold reality of what she had just witnessed. The money in her jacket pocket felt like it was burning through the fabric, reminding her of the dangerous game she was playing. Starting the engine, Lisa pulled out of the parking lot and began the drive back to her apartment. The streets of Chicago looked different at night, especially from the perspective of someone living on the wrong side of the law. Every police car made her heart race, every unexpected sound made her jump. She had been doing this job long enough to know that the most dangerous part wasn't the meetings or the criminals she dealt with. It was the constant stress of maintaining her cover, of never being able to fully relax or let her guard down. One mistake, one slip of the tongue, and she could end up as just another unsolved case file. As Lisa drove through the quiet streets, she had no idea that her night was about to take a turn that would test everything she had learned about being undercover. Sometimes the most routine moments can become the most dangerous, and sometimes the people you least expect can become the biggest threat to your mission. Lisa's hands gripped the steering wheel as she drove through the south side of Chicago. The meeting had ended an hour ago, but her mind was still racing with everything she had witnessed. The envelope of marked bills in her jacket pocket felt like it weighed 100 pounds, and every shadow on the street seemed to hide potential danger. She kept checking her rearview mirror, a habit that had become second nature during her 8 months undercover. The streets were quieter than usual for a Tuesday night, with only a few cars scattered here and there. Most of the businesses in this area closed early, leaving behind empty storefronts and flickering neon signs that painted the sidewalks in different colors. The radio in her car crackled with static as she tried to reach Agent Torres, her handler. The industrial area had always been a dead zone for communication, but tonight it seemed worse than ever. All she could hear was white noise mixed with fragments of other conversations that cut in and out like ghosts in the machine. "Torres, this is Phoenix," she whispered into the small microphone hidden in her collar, using her Operation Cody name. "Package delivered successfully. Heading home now." Nothing but static replied. Lisa's training kicked in as she assessed her situation. She was alone, carrying evidence that could put some very dangerous people behind bars, and she had no way to contact her backup. The smart thing would be to head straight to the safe house, but she also knew that arriving there without checking in first would raise questions. As she turned onto the main road that would take her back to her apartment, Lisa noticed she was driving more carefully than usual. Her speed was well below the limit, and she found herself checking every street sign and traffic light twice before proceeding. The stress of the evening was getting to her, and she could feel the exhaustion. Creeping in, behind her, about 3 blocks back, Officer David Williams was finishing up what had been a routine patrol shift. At 32, he had been with the Chicago Police Department for 7 years, and he knew these streets like the back of his hand. He had seen everything from domestic disputes to armed robberies, and he prided himself on being able to spot trouble before it escalated. Williams noticed the Honda Civic ahead of him immediately. The car was weaving slightly, not enough to be obviously drunk driving, but enough to catch his attention. The driver seemed nervous, uncertain, stopping for longer than necessary at green lights and taking turns that seemed hesitant and unplanned. His police instincts, honed by years of experience, told him something wasn't right. The car's behavior fit the profile of someone who was either under the influence, carrying something illegal, or running from something. In this neighborhood, all 3 possibilities were equally likely. Williams radioed his position to dispatch and began following the Honda at a safe distance. He watched as the driver continued to display signs of nervousness, sudden lane changes, frequent glances in the rearview mirror, and a speed that varied between too slow and slightly too fast. Lisa, meanwhile, had become aware of the police car behind her. At first, she thought it was just a coincidence, but as she made several turns and the patrol car continued to follow, she realized she was being watched. Her heart rate increased, and she forced herself to stay calm. This was exactly the kind of situation they had prepared for at Quantico. Being stopped by police while undercover was always a risk, but it was manageable as long as you stayed in character. The problem was that tonight, staying in character might mean going to jail, and going to jail could blow the entire operation. Williams made his decision when the Honda ran a yellow light that had clearly turned red before the car entered the intersection. It wasn't a major violation, but combined with the other suspicious behavior, it was enough to justify a traffic stop. He activated his emergency lights and pulled up behind the Honda. The sound of the police sirens cut through the night air like a knife. Lisa's stomach dropped as she saw the flashing red and blue lights fill her rearview mirror. For a moment, she considered running. Her car wasn't fast, but she knew these streets well enough to possibly lose a single patrol car in the maze of side streets and alleys, but running would only make things worse. It would confirm whatever suspicions the officer already had, and it would definitely destroy her cover. She had to play this smart, stay in character, and hope that Officer Williams would be satisfied with a simple traffic violation. Lisa pulled over to the curb slowly, her mind already switching gears. She was no longer Lisa Rodriguez, FBI agent. She was Maria Santos, small-time criminal with a record and an attitude to match. The transformation was complete by the time she put the car in park. Officer Williams approached the vehicle cautiously, his hand resting on his service weapon out of habit rather than any immediate threat assessment. The driver appeared to be a young Hispanic woman, probably in her late 20s, with dark hair and clothing that suggested she wasn't from the better parts of town. "Evening, ma'am," Williams said as he reached the driver's window. "I'm Officer Williams with the Chicago Police Department. Do you know why I stopped you tonight?" Lisa looked up at him with the kind of expression that mixed irritation with resignation. She had practiced this look in the mirror countless times. The face of someone who had dealt with police before and didn't expect the encounter to go well. "I was driving fine," she said, her voice carrying just the right amount of defensiveness. "I wasn't speeding or nothing." Williams studied her carefully. Up close, he could see that she was nervous, but there was something else. Her hands were shaking slightly, and she kept glancing toward the passenger seat as if she was worried about something there. "Ma'am, I observed your vehicle weaving within your lane and you ran a red light about a mile back," Williams explained, keeping his tone professional but firm. "I'm going to need to see your driver's license, registration, and proof of insurance." Lisa's heart was pounding as she reached for her purse. The fake identification was perfect, created by the FBI's best document specialist, but every time she had to use it, she worried that something would give her away. The registration and insurance were also fake, part of the elaborate cover story that had taken months to construct. "Here," she said, handing over the documents with fingers that trembled just enough to be noticeable. Williams took the documents and examined them with his flashlight. Maria Santos, age 28, address in a part of town known for its high crime rate. The registration showed the car was registered to her and the insurance was current. Everything appeared to be in order, but his instincts were still telling him something was wrong. "Miss Santos, have you been drinking tonight?" he asked, watching her reaction carefully. "No, sir," Lisa replied, making sure to avoid eye contact in the way that someone with a criminal record might. "I don't drink," Williams nodded, but he wasn't convinced. The woman's nervous behavior, combined with the late hour and the neighborhood they were in, suggested she might be involved in something illegal. He had seen enough drug deals and gang activity to recognize the signs. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle," he said, his voice taking on a more serious tone. Lisa's blood ran cold. This was the moment she had been dreading. Once she was out of the car, Officer Williams would have the legal right to search both her and the vehicle. The marked bills in her jacket pocket would be discovered, and explaining their presence without blowing her cover would be nearly impossible. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked, trying to buy time to think. "Just step out of the car, please," Williams repeated, his hand moving closer to his weapon. Lisa knew she had no choice. Refusing to comply would only make things worse, and it might escalate the situation to a point where someone could get hurt. She opened the car door slowly, her mind racing through possible scenarios and outcomes. As she stood on the sidewalk, Officer Williams called for backup. The situation had moved beyond a simple traffic stop, and he wanted another officer present for whatever came next. He had learned long ago that having a witness was always better than handling potentially dangerous situations alone. Lisa watched as Williams walked around her car, shining his flashlight through the windows. She knew he was looking for anything suspicious, anything that might justify a more thorough search. The envelope of money in her jacket felt like it was glowing, broadcasting its presence to anyone who looked in her direction. This was supposed to be the easy part of the operation. The dangerous work was done, the evidence was collected, and all she had to do was get back to safety. But now, standing on a dark street corner with a police officer who clearly suspected her of something, Lisa realized that sometimes the most routine moments could become the most dangerous. The sound of another police siren in the distance told her that backup was on the way. In a few minutes, there would be 2 officers, and the chances of talking her way out of this situation would become much smaller. She had to think fast, but she also had to be careful not to do anything that might compromise 8 months of dangerous undercover work. The backup unit arrived faster than Lisa had hoped. Officer Patricia Chun pulled up in her patrol car, the headlights cutting through the darkness and illuminating the scene. She had been partnered with Officer Williams for the past 2 years, and they had developed the kind of trust that came from watching each other's backs in dangerous situations. "What do we have here, Dave?" Officer Chun asked as she stepped out of her car, her hand instinctively resting on her duty belt. "Traffic stop that doesn't feel right," Williams replied, keeping his eyes on Lisa. "Subject shows signs of impairment or nervousness, possible contraband in the vehicle." Lisa felt her heart sink as she watched the 2 officers position themselves strategically around her. Officer Chun was younger, maybe in her late 20s, with the kind of alertness that came from being relatively new to the job. Her eyes moved constantly, taking in every detail of the scene and looking for potential threats. "Ma'am, I'm Officer Chun," she said, her voice professional but not unfriendly. "We're going to need you to place your hands on the hood of the vehicle while we conduct a search." This was it. The moment Lisa had been dreading since she first saw the police lights in her rearview mirror. She knew the law, knew her rights, but she also knew that exercising those rights would only make her look more suspicious. A person with nothing to hide wouldn't refuse a search, especially someone with Maria Santos' supposed criminal background. I don't understand what this is about, Lisa said, trying to inject just the right amount of confusion and irritation into her voice. I was just driving home from work. Officer Williams stepped closer, his flashlight beam moving across her face. What kind of work keeps you out until almost midnight on a Tuesday, Miss Santos? Lisa had rehearsed this story dozens of times, but standing on a dark street corner with two police officers staring at her made the words feel foreign in her mouth. I clean offices downtown. Night shift pays better than day shift. It wasn't entirely a lie. The FBI had actually arranged for her to work part-time at a cleaning service as part of her cover story. She had spent countless hours learning the details of that job, understanding the schedules, the pay structure, even the names of her support workers. Officer Chun walked around to the passenger side of the Honda, shining her flashlight through the windows. "Dave, take a look at this," she called out, pointing to something in the back seat. Williams joined her, leaving Lisa standing alone by the front of the car. They were looking at a small notebook that had fallen onto the floor, its pages scattered with what appeared to be numbers and abbreviations. To them, it looked like the kind of record-keeping that drug dealers and bookmakers used to track their business. But Lisa knew exactly what that notebook contained. It was part of her cover, filled with fake entries designed to make her look like a low-level criminal involved in illegal gambling. The FBI had been thorough in creating her background, and that notebook was supposed to be evidence of small-time crimes, not major federal investigations. "Miss Santos, whose notebook is this?" Officer Williams asked, holding up the small book. Lisa forced herself to look embarrassed, the way someone might when caught with evidence of minor illegal activity. "It's mine. Look, I take some bets for friends sometimes, just small stuff. It's not a big deal." Officer Chun exchanged a look with her partner. Small-time gambling was common in this neighborhood, but the nervous behavior and the late hour suggested there might be more to the story. They had both seen enough criminals to know that the ones who appeared most nervous were usually carrying something more serious than betting slips. "Ma'am, we're going to need to search your vehicle," Williams said, his voice taking on the formal tone he used when making official requests. "Do you consent to this search?" Lisa's mind raced through her options. She could refuse, which was her constitutional right, but that would only delay the inevitable. The officers clearly had enough probable cause to search anyway, and refusing would make her look even more suspicious. She had to stay in character, had to think like Maria Santos would think. "I guess," she said, trying to sound resigned rather than terrified. "But I don't know what you expect to find." Officer Chun began a systematic search of the vehicle while Williams kept watch over Lisa. The search was thorough and professional, starting with the easily accessible areas and working toward the more hidden spaces. Chun checked under the seats, in the glove compartment, and in the door panels. Lisa watched in growing panic as the search progressed. The marked bills were still in her jacket pocket, but she knew that a full search would eventually extend to her person. She tried to calculate how much time she had before that happened, how long she could maintain her cover before everything fell apart. "Dave, you need to see this," Officer Chun called out from the driver's side of the car. Williams walked over to where his partner was standing, her flashlight illuminating the glove compartment. Inside was an envelope thick with what appeared to be cash. Chun pulled it out carefully, using a pen to avoid contaminating any potential fingerprints. "That's a lot of money for someone who cleans offices," Williams observed, his suspicion now fully aroused. Lisa felt her stomach drop as she watched the officers examine the envelope. The money was part of her cover, meant to look like small-time gambling winnings, but she knew it would be impossible to explain why she was carrying several $1,000s in cash. "It's my savings," she said, knowing how weak it sounded even as the words left her mouth. "I don't trust banks." Officer Chun opened the envelope and began counting the bills. "Miss Santos, there's over $3,000 here. That's a lot of savings for someone working a night shift cleaning job." The two officers stepped away from Lisa to confer in low voices. She couldn't hear what they were saying, but their body language told her everything she needed to know. They were no longer treating this as a simple traffic stop. This had become a criminal investigation. Williams returned to where Lisa was standing. Miss Santos, I need to ask you some questions about where this money came from. Lisa knew she was walking a tightrope. She had to provide explanations that were believable without revealing any details about her real work. The story had to be consistent with her cover identity, but it also had to be something that wouldn't lead to immediate arrest. I've been saving for a long time, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. I do some side work sometimes, cleaning houses for people who pay cash. It adds up. What kind of side work? Officer Chun asked, rejoining the conversation. Lisa had to think fast. The cover story was detailed, but it hadn't anticipated this level of scrutiny. I clean houses in the suburbs sometimes. Rich people. Who want their maids to be invisible, you know? They pay cash because they don't want to deal with taxes and paperwork. It was a plausible explanation, and both officers knew that this kind of under-the-table work was common in their city. But the amount of money, combined with the nervous behavior and the suspicious notebook, still didn't add up to a complete picture. Williams made a decision. Ma'am, I'm going to need to search your person as well. Do you have any weapons, drugs, or anything else I should know about? This was the moment Lisa had been dreading. Once they searched her jacket, they would find the marked bills from the meeting. The serial numbers on those bills were recorded by the FBI, and explaining their presence would be impossible without revealing her true identity. No, sir, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Officer Chun stepped forward. I'll conduct the search, she said, following proper procedure for searching a female suspect. Lisa raised her arms as instructed, feeling the weight of the envelope in her jacket pocket. She tried to think of explanations, stories that might work, but nothing seemed adequate. The marked bills were evidence in a federal investigation, and their discovery would either blow her cover or land her in jail. Officer Chun's search was professional and thorough. She started with Lisa's outer clothing, checking pockets and feeling for hidden objects. When her hand touched the envelope in Lisa's jacket pocket, both women froze. What's this? Chun asked, her voice taking on a sharper edge. Lisa closed her eyes, knowing that the next few minutes would determine whether 8 months of dangerous undercover work would be wasted. It's just more money, she said weakly. Ching pulled out the envelope and immediately noticed that it was different from the first one. The bills were newer, crisper, and they were bound with a rubber band that had markings on it. To a trained police officer, it looked like the kind of money that came from a recent transaction. Miss Santos, this is a lot of cash to be carrying. Around, Chun said, her suspicion now matching her partner's. I need you to explain where this came from. Lisa felt the walls closing in around her. She was running out of explanations, running out of time, and running out of options. The two officers were clearly convinced that she was involved in something illegal, and they weren't going to let her go until they had answers. I can explain, Lisa said, though she wasn't sure how. It's not what you think. Officer Williams stepped closer, his hand moving to his handcuffs. Ma'am, based on what we found here tonight, I think we're going to need to continue this conversation downtown. The word downtown sent a chill through Lisa's body. Being arrested would mean fingerprints, photographs. Time seemed to slow down as Officer Williams reached for his handcuffs. The metallic click of the cuffs opening cut through the night air like a gunshot. Lisa could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears, drowning out the distant sound of traffic and the hum of the patrol car engines. You have the right to remain silent, Williams began, his voice taking on the practiced rhythm of someone who had read these rights hundreds of times before. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Lisa's mind was racing faster than it ever had before. 8 months of her life, countless hours of dangerous work, and the safety of other undercover agents all hung in the balance. She thought about Vincent Torino and his Uncle Tony, about the money laundering operation that was finally within the FBI's grasp. If she was arrested tonight, if her cover was blown, all of that work would disappear, but there was something else she was thinking about too. Officer Williams and Officer Chun were good cops doing their jobs. They had followed proper procedure, they had been professional and respectful, and they were only trying to keep their community safe. The last thing she wanted was to put them in danger by revealing her identity in the wrong way. Officer Williams, Lisa said quietly, interrupting his recitation of her rights. I need to tell you something. Williams paused, the handcuffs still in his hands. Ma'am, you can explain everything at the station. Right now, I need you to turn around and place your hands behind your back. Lisa took a deep breath, knowing that the next few seconds would change everything. She had been trained for this moment. But no amount of training could prepare someone for the reality of potentially ending an operation that had taken years to develop. Officer, before you arrest me, I need to show you something, she said, her voice steady, despite the chaos in her mind. It's in my jacket pocket. I'm going to reach for it very slowly. Officer Chun immediately stepped forward, her hand moving to her weapon. Ma'am, keep your hands where we can see them. If you have something to show us, we'll retrieve it. Lisa nodded, understanding their caution. It's in my inside jacket pocket on the left side. Please be careful when you take it out. Williams and Chun exchanged a look. They had both seen suspects try to pull weapons during arrests, and they weren't taking any chances. Chun approached Lisa carefully, her training taking over as she prepared to search the jacket pocket. Dave, cover me, Chun said. Positioning herself so that Williams had a clear view of both Lisa and her hands, Lisa stood perfectly still, her arms slightly raised as Officer Chun reached into her jacket pocket. The first thing Chun felt was leather, smooth and worn from years of use. She pulled out what appeared to be a wallet, but it was thicker and heavier than a normal wallet. What is this? Chun asked, holding the leather case up to the light. Open it, Lisa said simply. Chun flipped open the case, and both officers' worlds suddenly turned upside down. Inside was a gold badge that gleamed under the streetlights, and next to it was an official identification card with Lisa's photo and name, but it wasn't the name they had been calling her all night. Special Agent Lisa Rodriguez, Federal Bureau of Investigation, Chun read aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. William stepped closer, his handcuffs forgotten in his hand. Let me see that, he said, his voice filled with disbelief. Chun handed him the credentials, and William studied them carefully under his flashlight. The badge was real, the ID card had all the proper security features, and the photo matched the woman standing in front of them, but his mind was struggling to process what he was seeing. This can't be right, William said, though even as he spoke, he was beginning to understand why something had felt off about this whole situation. You're telling me you're a federal agent? Lisa nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and terror. I've been working undercover for the past 8 months. The money you found, the notebook, all of it is part of my cover. Officer Chun looked back and forth between Lisa and the credentials, her training telling her to be skeptical, but her instincts telling her that this was real. If you're really FBI, why didn't you say something sooner? Because I couldn't, Lisa explained, her voice carrying the weight of months of careful planning. Breaking cover like this could get me killed. It could get other agents killed. It could destroy an investigation that's taken years to build. Williams was still staring at the FBI credentials, his mind trying to catch up with what was happening. In 7 years as a police officer, he had never encountered anything like this. He had arrested drug dealers, thieves, and even a few federal fugitives, but he had never stopped an undercover FBI agent. How do we know these are real? He asked, his police training making him skeptical of everything. Anyone can buy fake badges online. Lisa understood his suspicion. Call the FBI field office, ask for Agent Michael Torres. Tell him Phoenix needs verification. He'll confirm my identity. The mention of specific names and code words added credibility to her story, but Williams was still struggling to believe what he was hearing. You're telling me that Maria Santos doesn't exist? Maria Santos is my cover identity, Lisa explained. I've been using her to infiltrate a money laundering operation connected to the Torino crime family. Tonight's meeting was a major breakthrough in the investigation. Officer Chun was studying the ID card more closely, looking for any signs that it might be fake. But everything about it looked authentic, from the special paper to the embedded security features. Dave, I think she's telling the truth. Williams looked at his partner, then back at Lisa. If you're really FBI, then why were you acting so nervous during the traffic stop? Lisa almost laughed, but the situation was too serious. Because I was terrified. Getting stopped by police while undercover is every agent's nightmare. I was trying to stay in character while also trying to figure out how to get out of this situation without blowing my cover. The three of them stood in silence. For a moment, the weight of the situation settling over them. Williams and Chun were realizing that they had just stumbled into the middle of a federal investigation. While Lisa was coming to terms with the fact that her cover was now compromised, what happens now? Chun asked, voicing the question that all three of them were thinking. Lisa looked at both officers, seeing the confusion and concern in their eyes. Now, I need to contact my handler immediately. This changes everything about the operation. Williams was still holding the FBI credentials, turning them over in his hands as if he couldn't quite believe they were real. Are we in trouble? For stopping you? No, Lisa said quickly. You were doing your jobs. You followed proper procedure and you had legitimate reasons for the stop. If anything, you might have saved my life. How? Chun asked. Lisa thought about the meeting she had just left. About the dangerous people she had been dealing with for the past 8 months. The Torino family has people everywhere. If they suspected I was law enforcement, they would have killed me tonight. By stopping me, by finding the money, you've actually given me a cover story for why I was acting nervous. Williams was beginning to understand the complexity of the situation. You mean you can tell them you were nervous because you were worried about getting caught with the money? Exactly, Lisa said. Small-time criminals are always nervous around police. Getting stopped and searched actually makes my cover more believable. Officer Chun looked at the evidence bags containing the money and the notebook. So all of this is part of your investigation? Lisa nodded. The money in the glove compartment is part of my cover. The money in my jacket pocket is marked bills from tonight's meeting. Both are crucial evidence in a federal case. Williams handed the credentials back to Lisa, his expression showing a mixture of amazement and respect. Agent Rodriguez, I have to say, this is the most unusual traffic stop I've ever made. Lisa smiled for the first time all night. Officer Williams, I hope it's the last one like this you ever have to make. But even as she said it, Lisa knew that her problems were just beginning. She had blown her cover to save the investigation. But now she had to figure out how to continue the operation without getting herself killed. The Toreno family was expecting Maria Santos to show up for work tomorrow, and they would be watching for any signs that she wasn't who she claimed to be. I need to call my handler, Lisa said, reaching for her phone. And I need to ask both of you to keep this absolutely confidential. The wrong word to the wrong person could end this investigation and put lives at risk. Williams and Chun both nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. They had signed up to be police officers, but tonight they had become part of something much bigger than they had ever imagined. As Lisa dialed Agent Torres's number, she looked at the two officers who had unknowingly become part of her cover story. Sometimes the most dangerous situations came from the most unexpected places, and sometimes the people who seemed like threats turned out to be exactly the help you needed. Lisa's phone rang 3 times before Agent Torres picked up. She could hear the concern in his voice immediately when he answered, even though she had used their code phrase to identify herself. Phoenix, where the hell have you been? Torres's voice crackled through the phone. I've been trying to reach you for 2 hours. I ran into some complications, Lisa said, glancing at Officers Williams and Chun, who were standing nearby trying to process everything that had just happened. I need immediate backup at my location, and we need to discuss how this affects the operation. While Lisa talked to her handler, Williams and Chun stood by their patrol cars, both still struggling to believe what they had witnessed. In all their years of police work, neither had ever encountered a situation quite like this one. They had gone from arresting a suspected criminal to becoming part of a federal investigation in the span of 30 minutes. Dave, do you think we handled this right? Chun asked quietly, watching Lisa pace as she talked on the phone. Williams thought about the question seriously. I think we followed procedure exactly like we were supposed to. We had probable cause. For the stop, the search was legal, and we treated her professionally throughout the whole thing. But what if we had arrested her before she could show us the badge? Chen wondered aloud. The thought sent a chill through both officers. If Lisa had been booked into the county jail under her cover identity, it could have exposed her to criminals who might recognize her from her undercover work. In the worst-case scenario, it could have gotten her killed. 15 minutes later, a black SUV pulled up behind the patrol cars. Agent Torres stepped out, followed by two other agents that Lisa recognized from the task force. Torres was a man in his mid-40s with graying hair and the kind of calm demeanor that came from years of handling crisis situations. "Agent Rodriguez," Torres said as he approached, relief evident in his voice. "Are you injured?" "I'm fine," Lisa replied. "But we have a situation that needs to be addressed immediately." Torres looked at the two police officers, then back at Lisa. "I assume these are the officers who stopped you?" Williams stepped forward, still feeling somewhat surreal about the entire situation. "Agent Torres, I'm Officer Williams, and this is my partner, Officer Chun. We stopped Agent Rodriguez for a traffic violation and discovered what we believe to be evidence of criminal activity." Torres nodded, understanding the complexity of the situation. "Officer Williams, you and your partner may have inadvertently saved Agent Rodriguez's life tonight." "How so?" Chun asked. One of the other FBI agents, Agent Kelly, stepped forward to explain. "The people Agent Rodriguez has been investigating are extremely dangerous. They have contacts throughout the criminal justice system, and they monitor police activity closely. If they suspected she was law enforcement, she would have disappeared by tomorrow morning." Lisa looked at both officers with genuine gratitude. "By stopping me tonight, by treating me like any other suspect, you've actually strengthened my cover story. When I tell the Torino family that I was nervous because I was carrying money and got pulled over by police, they'll believe it completely." Torres was already thinking ahead to the next steps. "We need to debrief immediately and figure out how to use this situation to our advantage. The operation is too important to abandon now." Williams was beginning to understand the bigger picture. "Agent Torres, what exactly is Agent Rodriguez investigating?" "The largest money laundering operation in the city's history," Torres replied. "The Torino crime family has been washing millions of dollars through legitimate businesses for years. Tonight's meeting gave us evidence that could bring down the entire organization." Over the next hour, the group worked together to turn what could have been a disaster into an opportunity. The traffic stop would become part of Lisa's cover story, explaining her nervous behavior and providing a reason for any changes in her routine that the criminals might notice. Agent Kelly took detailed statements from both officers, documenting exactly what had happened during the stop. Every detail was important because Lisa would need to recount the story convincingly to maintain her cover. "The key," Torres explained to Williams and Chun, "is that everything you did tonight was completely legitimate. Agent Rodriguez was actually breaking traffic laws, she was carrying suspicious amounts of cash, and she was acting nervous. Your response was textbook police work." Lisa practiced telling the story from Maria Santos' perspective, making sure she could describe the officers' actions, the questions they asked, and the search they conducted. The story had to be perfect because the people she was deceiving could check every detail. "What happens next?" Chun asked as the debriefing concluded. Torres looked at his watch. It was nearly 3 in the morning, and they all knew that the next few days would be crucial for the operation. Agent Rodriguez goes back to her apartment and waits for contact from the Torino organization. When they call, she tells them about getting stopped by police while carrying money from their operation. "And if they don't believe her?" Williams asked. Lisa smiled grimly. "Then I disappear, and you two will probably be called in to testify about tonight's events at my memorial service." The dark humor wasn't lost on either officer. They were beginning to understand the incredible risks that undercover agents faced every day, and the thin line between success and disaster in operations like this one. As the group prepared to leave, Torres pulled Williams and Chien aside. Officers, what happened tonight stays between us until this operation is complete. The safety of Agent Rodriguez and several other undercover agents depends on your discretion." Both officers nodded, understanding the weight of the responsibility they now carried. "Will we know how this turns out?" Chun asked. "When it's safe to do so, we'll make sure you're both informed about the results of the investigation," Torres promised. 6 weeks later, Lisa sat in a federal courthouse watching as the last members of the Torino crime family were sentenced. The operation had been a complete success, resulting in the arrest of over 20 people and the seizure of millions of dollars in assets. Vincent Torino had been sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. His uncle Tony received 25 years. The money laundering network that had operated for decades was completely dismantled. After the sentencing, Lisa found herself thinking about that night on the South Side when Officers Williams and Chun had changed the course of her life. The traffic stop that could have ended her career had instead become the key to its greatest success. She had kept in touch with both officers throughout the investigation, providing updates when security allowed. They had become unlikely allies in a dangerous game, and their professionalism had made the difference between success and failure. A week after the sentencing, Lisa attended a ceremony at the Chicago Police Department where Officers Williams and Chin received commendations for their role in the investigation. Neither officer had sought recognition, but the FBI had insisted that their contribution be acknowledged. "I still can't believe how it all turned out," Williams said as they talked after the ceremony. "When I pulled you over that night, I thought I was just doing a routine traffic stop." Lisa laughed, remembering her own terror during those first few minutes of the encounter. "Officer Williams, there was nothing routine about that night for any of us." Chun shook her head in amazement. To think that stopping someone for weaving in traffic led to taking down an entire crime family. "It wasn't just the traffic stop," Lisa explained. "It was how professional you both were throughout the entire encounter. You followed procedure, you treated me with respect, and you gave me exactly the kind of experience that made my cover story believable." Torres, who had also attended the ceremony, joined their conversation. "The Torino investigation will be studied at Quantico for years as an example of how different law enforcement agencies can work together, even when they don't know they're working together." As the evening wound down, Lisa realized that she had learned something important about police work that wasn't taught in any academy. Sometimes the most significant cases came from the most ordinary moments. A routine traffic stop, conducted by officers simply doing their jobs, had become the foundation for one of the most successful organized crime investigations in the city's history. Williams and Chin had no way of knowing that their decision to stop a suspicious driver would lead to dismantling a criminal empire. They had simply followed their training, trusted their instincts, and treated everyone with professionalism and respect. Looking back, Lisa understood that this was what good police work really looked like. It wasn't always about dramatic raids or high-speed chases. Sometimes it was about two officers on patrol, paying attention to details, and caring enough about their community to investigate when something didn't seem right. The badge that had left Officer Williams speechless that night had become a symbol of something larger. The idea that law enforcement worked best when different agencies supported each other, even in the most unexpected circumstances. As Lisa drove home from the ceremony, she passed through the same neighborhood where Williams and Chun had stopped her months earlier. The streets looked different now, safer somehow, knowing that the criminal network that had operated there for so long was finally gone.